Hello everybody, today I'm going to be showing you guys how I implement authorization and authentication in my own personal web applications. As you can probably tell by the title, I'm going to be using the Mern stack, and I'm also going to be using JSON Web Token for authentication. I'm also going to be doing some route protection, so yeah, if you'd like to see how I do this, just keep watching. Alright, so we're going to start off here in our front end, and I'm just going to quickly go over the starter code that I have here. So I have a components folder with a nav bar, and inside this nav bar I have links to the home, sign up, and login page. And then I have a pages folder with a home, login, profile, and sign up page. So in the home page, I don't have anything in here, as you can see. In the login page, I have a very simple form that takes an email and a password. I have some state up here for the inputs, and then I have some handler functions to handle when I'm actually typing into the inputs. And then for my sign up page, I have basically the same thing, except this one takes a name, email, and password. So same exact thing as the login page, except it takes a name, email, and password. And then for my profile page, I just have an H1 in here that says profile page. We're going to start off in the sign up page. And what we want to do here is when we press submit, we want to sign up for an account. So we're going to make a request to our backend to our sign up route. So we're going to need to import Axios here. So import Axios, and then I'm going to make a variable up here called API URL. And this is just going to have our backend URL. So HTTP localhost 5005, because this is where our backend is running. So then down here, I'm going to make a function called handle submit. And this is going to take in the event object, and we're going to do a e.prevent default, so the page doesn't reload when we press submit. And then we're going to make a body here, a body object, and we're going to put the email, the name, email, and password. So name, email, and password. And we're going to use this and send it along with our request. So axios.post, and then we're going to put our API URL in here. And this is going to be to the sign up route. So sign up, and then we're going to add the body right here. And then we can do a dot then, get the response. And for right now, I'm just going to console.log the response. And if there's an error, we'll catch it. All right, I'm going to add this function to the form. So on submit, handle submit. And now I'm also going to do the same thing for the login page. So I'm going to import Axios up here, and then add the API URL, and I'm just going to copy that over. All right. And then make our submit function. So handle submit. e.prevent default, and then we'll make the body with the email and password. So email, password, and then we're going to make our Axios request to the login route. So axios.post, and then we'll put our body right here and do the same thing, get the response, and just console.log it for now. As well as the error. And then I have to add it to this form as well. So on submit, handle submit. All right, this is all that we need to do in the front end to start off with. So now I'm going to go into the back end and actually make these routes. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my back end. All right, so I'm just going to quickly go over this starter code as well. So I have a configuration folder here with some simple configuration. I have my database folder where we're connecting to MongoDB. I have my models folder where we have our user schema, and this is what we're going to actually be using to create our user. So it takes a name, email, and password. And then I have my routes here. This is where we're going to be making all our routes. There's a sign up, login, and verify route in here so far. And then in my app.js, I'm just requiring my routes and then having my app use it. And then here in my server, we're just listening on port 5005. So we're going to go into our auth.routes.js and we're going to start off with the sign up route. So in our front end, we sent the body with our request. So we need to get those values out of the body. So I'm just going to do some destructuring here and say const name, email, and password is equal to rec.body. And the first thing that I want to do is check if any of these are an empty string. And if they are, I want to send back an error. So if email, or I'll say name first. So if name is equal to an empty string, or email, or password, if any of these are equal to an empty string, we want to return an error. So res.status 400, and then I'll say please enter a name, email, and password. All right. And then the next thing that I want to do is check if the email is valid. So I'm just going to use a regular expression that I found online for that. So I'm going to say const email regex is equal to this regular expression that I found, and we can say if email regex dot test, and we'll put the email in there. If this returns a falsy value, we can go ahead and say the email is invalid. So return res dot status 400, and then we'll say please enter a valid email. All right. And after that, we want to check the password. So I want the password to be at least 8 characters long, and I want it to have at least one uppercase letter and at least one lowercase letter. So I'm also going to use a regular expression for that. So const password regex, and I just also found this regular expression online, so we'll put that there, and then we'll do the same thing as the email. So if password regex dot test, put the password in there. If that returns a falsy value, we can return an error. So return res dot status 400 .json, and then we can say password must be at least 8 characters long and have at least one uppercase and one lowercase letter. All right. So if everything goes well, then we can check our database and see if the user already exists. Because if the user already exists, we don't want to go ahead and make an account for them. So I'm going to use my user schema. So I'm going to pull that in over here. So const user is equal to require. I'm going to get it from my models folder and then get that user. And then I'm going to say user.find1, and we're going to find it by the email. So I do .then, get the user here, and say if user returns a truthy value, this means that the user already exists. We need to return an error. So return res.status 400. And then we can say user already exists. All right. And if the user doesn't exist, we can go ahead and make the user. So the first thing that we need to do is hash the password, because we don't want to store the user's passwords in our database just out in the open. We want to hash them first so no one can see them. So I'm going to use bcrypt for that. I'm going to pull that in up here. So const bcrypt JS is equal to require bcrypt JS. All right. I'm going to make some salt here for our password, and this is just to make our password longer and harder to decrypt. So const salt is equal to bcrypt.js dot gensalt sync, and then I'm going to put 10 in there. And then I'm going to make a variable for the hashed password. So hash password is equal to bcrypt.js or bcrypt.js, sorry, and dot hash sync. And then we'll add our password here and the salt. And now we can create our user. So we're going to return user.create. And then we got to add the name, email, and then for the password, we'll put the hashed password. All right, and so if all goes well, then we can send a success message. So return res.status 200. And we'll say user has been created. All right, and then if something goes wrong, we can send an error. Oops. All right, return res.status 400. And then we'll say user could not be created. All right, so that's the the sign up route. And now we can actually test if this works. So I'm just going to inspect here, and I'm going to go to my console. And since we're console.logging in the front end, it should show up here. So I'm going to say Alyssa, and then I'll say Alyssa at gmail.com. And then I'll put my password in here. All right, so user has been created. Let me try seeing if it gives us an error if I try submitting this again. So, okay, yes. Let's see what the response is. User already exists. Okay, cool. And let's see if this works. All right. Response. Please enter name, email, and password. Okay, cool. It looks like everything's working. So now we can move along to our login route. So same thing as the sign up route, we need to pull the values from the body. So const email password is equal to rec.body. All right. And then we want to check if either the email or password are an empty string. So if email is equal to an empty string or password, then we want to return an error. So we'll say return res.status 400. And then we'll say, please enter an email and password. All right. And if they aren't an empty string, we can move along and we're going to find the user in the database. So user.find1, and we're going to find it by its email again. And we'll get the user. And we want to return an error if the user doesn't exist. So we can say if user returns a falsy value, we can return an error saying invalid credentials. So res.status 400. And then say invalid credentials. And if the user does exist, we want to check if the password that was entered in matches the password in the database. So I'm going to make a variable here called passwords match. And then this is going to be equal to bcrypt.js dot compare sync. And then I'm going to put my password in here as well as the password from the user. So user.password. And this is going to either return true or false. So if it returns false, we want to return an error because obviously the passwords don't match. So if that returns a falsy value, we can say invalid credentials again. So res.status, oops, I need to put 400, and then we can add our message here. So invalid credentials. So if the passwords do match, then we're going to make a token with JSON web token, and we're going to send this token back to the user. And this is the token that the user is going to use to make requests for certain routes. So I'm going to go ahead and import bcrypt up here. So const, or not bcrypt, sorry, JSON web token. So JSON web token is equal to require JSON web token. All right, so for these tokens, we need to make a payload. So I'm going to say payload, const payload. So this is going to take the name of the user. So I'm going to say name, user.name, and the email, and the ID of the user. So in MongoDB, whenever something is created, it gets an ID. So we're just going to pull this from the user. So user dot underscore ID. Oops. Why did I do that? User dot underscore ID. Okay. All right, and then this is what we're going to add to our token. So I'm going to say const token is equal to JSON web token dot sign, and we're going to add our payload here. And we also need a token secret. So I'm going to go ahead and make a .env file. Oops, not in there. Make it out here, so .env. And in this .env file, I'm going to make a secret. So I'm going to say token secret is equal to, I'm just going to say token secret. You really shouldn't do this in a real application. You should put a way better secret, but this is okay for right now. So token secret, and we're going to use this token secret to sign this token. So process.env token secret. And then we also want to add a algorithm and a expires time. So this is just the algorithm that I use. You can use whatever one you want, but this is just the one I use. And then for the expires time, I'm going to say 1 hour. Now that we got the token, we want to send it to the user. So we'll say res.status 400, or not 400, sorry, 200. And we'll say JSON, and we'll put the token right in there. And then we can do a .catched out in here. So .catch error, and then we'll say res.status 400, and then we'll just say something went wrong. All right, so now I'm going to try to log in and see what it shows me. So alyssa@gmail.com. All right, so I got a success message, and here is our token. I'm going to go back into our front end now, and we're going to handle the logic for storing this token and then sending it back to our server. All right, so now that I'm back in the front end, I'm going to make some context. I'm going to make some context because we need to share some variables throughout the entire page to see if we're logged in or not. So I'm going to come into my source folder. I'm going to make a context folder. And then I'm going to say auth.context.js. All right, and here I'm going to import create context. I'm going to import that from React. And then I'm going to say auth context, make a variable auth context, and this will be equal to create context. Then down here, I'm going to make my wrapper, so function auth provider wrapper, and this is going to return auth context dot provider. Then we'll put the value here so it doesn't give us an error. And then I'm going to export both the auth context and the auth provider wrapper. All right, so if you don't understand this, you're probably not familiar with context. This is just the starter code that we kind of need to make everything work. So if you don't understand context, definitely look up a video on it. I'm not that good at explaining what that is, so definitely look at a video of it and come back to this video when you're done if you don't understand. And the last thing that we need to do to make sure this works is go into our index.js, and we need to import that provider wrapper. So import auth provider wrapper, and we need to wrap it around our entire app. So auth provider wrapper. And this basically just enables our entire app to use whatever is in this auth provider wrapper. So now I'm going to just save this, and then I'm going to go back into my auth.context.js, and then I also have to take props in here and then put props.children, or else our entire app is going to break. So I'll put that there. All right, so now I'm going to make some functions and some state here. So I'm going to import use state. And then I'm going to come in here and I'm going to make a state for telling whether or not the user is logged in or not. So I'm going to say is logged in. And then set is logged in, and this is going to be false to start off with. And then I'm also going to make a loading state, and we're going to be using this in our route protection files. So I'll show you later what we do with it, but for right now, it's just going to be set to true. So set loading equals use state true. And then I'm also going to make a state for the user. So user, set user. And this will be null to start off with since we don't have the user, they're not logged in. So once they log in and they're verified, then we can set the information that we get back from the route to this user. So the first function that I'm going to make is a store items function. And this is going to take a token parameter. And what we're going to do is basically just store this token in local storage. And we're also going to store a timestamp because we're going to need this timestamp later to tell whether or not the token has expired. So I'm going to say local storage dot set item. I'll put token right there and then just put the token. And then a timestamp as well. And I'll put a date.now. All right. So I'll save that. And then the next thing that I want to do is put this store items function in my value here because we're going to be using this in our login page. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to come into my login page and I'm going to import use context up here. So use context. And then I'm also going to import the auth context. And down here, I'm going to do some destructuring and get that store items function. So store items is equal to use context, and then we'll put the auth context in there. So when we get the response from the login page, if they log in successfully, we get that token. So let me just log in again to show you. Right, so we get this token in this data here. So I'm going to use the store items function right here and put response dot data dot token. All right, and I'm just gonna delete this. And so now when I log in, if I go to my application here, the token should be in local storage. So, all right, cool. So yes, it's here and it's with the timestamp. So awesome, that works. So now I'm going to go back to my auth.context, and I'm going to make a function to tell whether or not the token has expired. So I'm going to say const has token expired. And then we need to get the token from local storage. So local storage dot get item token, and then we also need the timestamp. right? And if either of these return a falsy value, we want to return false. So if token is a falsy value or timestamp, then we'll return false. And if not, then we can check how much time has passed. So I'm going to say const time passed, and this will be equal to date.now minus the timestamp. Oops. Okay. And then we're going to check whether the time passed is greater than an hour in milliseconds, because if you remember, we signed the token in our server with an expires time of 1 hour. So return time passed is greater than 3,600,000. That's a millisecond, or that's an hour in milliseconds. So 3,600,000. Okay, so this function is going to either return true or false. And then I also want to make a logout function. So in here, I'm going to clear everything from local storage. So local storage dot remove item. We'll remove the token and then the timestamp as well. And then we'll just do a reload. So window dot location dot reload. All right. And something happened. Okay, something got imported up here, so I'll just delete this. All right, so now I want to make an authentication function. So this function is going to run on every reload, and what this function is basically going to do is make a request to our verify route in the backend, and we're going to be making that in a little bit, but it's going to make that request, and that route is going to check whether the token is valid or not. And if it is valid, it's going to send us back a user, and if it's not, it's going to send us an error. So this is going to run on every reload. So I'll say const authenticate user. And the first thing that I want to see is if the token is even there. So I'll say token. I'll get the token from local storage. So if the token isn't there, or the has token expired function returns true, we want to log the user out. So we're going to call our logout function. And then we also want to set the user to null. We want to set is logged into false, and then we want to set is loading to true. So set is logged into false, set loading to true, and then set the user to null. And if the token does exist, then we can make our Axios request. So I'm going to import Axios up here. All right. And we're going to make this request to our verify route. So Axios.get. And then we're going to send our token in the headers here. So headers, and then the token. And then I'll do a dot then. For right now, we'll just console.log the response. And if something goes wrong, we'll catch it. API URL doesn't exist. Okay, so I have to make a variable up here. All right. I also want to actually set these states back to their original state if we get an error. So I'll say set loading to false. Or I'll just copy this up here. So just put that down here. And now that we've got this done, I'm going to import use effect up here. All right. And then I'm going to come down here and I'm going to say use effect. And then call this authenticate user function. All right, and I'm not going to save this right now because this route doesn't exist yet. So we need to go back into our backend and make that route. So I'm just going to open that up right now. So we need to make a middleware to check if the token is valid or not. So I'm just going to come in here and I'm going to make a middlewares folder. And I'm going to make a file called jwt.middleware.js. And then I'm going to import JSON web token in here. And then I'm going to make a function called isAuthenticated. And this is going to take a request object, a response object, and next. So in here, I'm going to get the token from the headers. So rec.headers.token. And if the token doesn't exist, then we're going to send back an error. So I'll say return res.status. Let's say 400. And then we'll just say token needed for authentication. All right, and if the token does exist, then we can move on and we can check if the token is valid or not. So I'm going to say const decoded is equal to JSON web token dot verify. And then I'm going to put the token in here and I'm going to put the secret as well that we signed the token with earlier in our login route. So process.env.token secret. All right, and if this returns a falsy value, that means the token isn't valid. So then we can return an error. So return res.status 400. And then we can say token is not valid. And if it is valid, we can attach it to our request object. So I'll say rec.user is equal to decoded. And then I want to call next. So I'll save that. And then I'll export it down here. So module.exports is equal to is authenticated. And now we can pull this into our auth routes. So I'll come up here, say const is authenticated. And it's going to be equal to require. And then I'll go into my middlewares and then get that middleware that we made. So then I'll come down here and then I'll put is authenticated. And then we can send back the user object. So res.status 200 and then rec.user. This is what we attached in our middleware here. This is what we attached to the request object. So we'll send that back. So now I'm going to go back into my front end and then handle storing the user. In the response, if we get the user back, we're going to set loading to true, or sorry, set loading to false. Set the user to the response.data.user, and then we'll set is logged in to true. All right, so I'll save that, and then let's see here. All right, so now since the page has already reloaded, we get this response here and it has the user object. So it has the email, the ID, and the name. And if you remember, this is what we put in the payload when we signed our token. All right, so now that we're all authenticated, we can do some route protection. And we need this because we only want users that are logged in to see certain pages and users that are anonymous to see certain pages. So if we're logged in, we don't want the user to be able to see this sign up and login page. That wouldn't make sense. We want to show them the home page and the profile page. And if users are not logged in, we want to show them the sign in and login page. The home page is just going to be for users that are logged in and anonymous, but the sign up and login are only for anonymous, and then the profile is only for logged in users. So I'm going to go ahead and make a is private component here. So is private.js, and then I'm also going to make a is anonymous. All right, so in this private component, I'm going to add some boilerplate code with RAFCE. Save that. So in this component, we're going to be checking if the user is logged in or not. And if they are, they'll be able to see the children of this component. And if they're not, we're going to redirect them to the login page. So I'm just going to come up here, and we need to import the is logged in and is loading states from the auth context. So I don't know why I put cons. So import use context. And then we also want to import the auth context. All right, and then down here we can do some destructuring. We'll say const is logged in, and then is loading. So first we want to check if is loading is set to true. So if is loading is true, then we can return a loading screen. So I'll just put a p tag right here and put loading. Then we want to check if is logged in is set to false. So if is logged in is a falsy value, we want to navigate them to the login page. So we're going to need to import navigate up here. So import navigate, and then we'll return navigate to the login page. All right. Otherwise, we can return the props.children. So I need to take props up here and then return props.children. And I'll just delete this. Okay. Now I'm going to go into my is anonymous and add some boilerplate code. And we're going to do almost the same thing, just a few things differently, but I'm going to import use context up here. And then navigate as well as the auth context. Then we need to get the is loading and is logged in. Okay. And then we want to check if is loading is true. Need to delete this. All right, and then we can check if is logged in is true. So if is logged in is true, we want to navigate them to the profile page. So navigate to profile. All right, and if they're not logged in, then we can return props.children. So now I'm going to go back into my app.js and I'm going to import these components. So import is anonymous and import is private. So now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to wrap the sign up and login route with the is anonymous. And then the profile route with the is private. All right, so now if we reload, we should be redirected to the profile page. Okay, and we weren't redirected, so something is wrong. Okay, so I think the issue is I didn't add them to the value, so these pages don't have access to these states here. So let me just add those. So is logged in, is loading. Is it that what it's called? Oh, loading. I'm going to need to change that in my components. So loading. And then I need to change it in the is private as well. So all right, and as you can see, we were redirected to the profile page. So I'm going to try clicking on this sign up page here, and as you can see, it's not letting me go to it, as well as the login page. It's not letting me see either of these pages. It's automatically redirecting me to the profile page. So I'm going to go into my nav bar now and fix this. So I'm going to import use context. So import use context, and then I also want to import my auth context, and then here I want to import is loading, or not is loading, sorry, is logged in. And then here I want to import is logged in. And then I also want to get the logout function. So I need to add that to the value in my auth.context. So I'll put that over here. or not loading, oh my gosh, log out. Okay, and then I want to return this block of code if the is logged in returns false. So is logged in, if is logged in is a falsy value, we're going to return the UL with the home, the sign up, and the login page. And if logged in is true, we want to return the home, the profile, and a logout button. So I'm going to need to delete this link here and actually add a button. And then in here, we can add an on click. Oops. And then call the logout function. Right, and I'm just gonna quickly style this so it's not bothering me. All right, so now we're all done. We've got our authentication, we've got our route protection. I'm just gonna go to the home page, profile. I'm gonna log out, and as you can see, okay, something's happening. All right, so I figured out the issue. I need to take this logout function out of this block of code right here, because if the token doesn't exist, it's going to keep on calling this logout function. And obviously when we first log in or first sign up, we're not logged in, so it's going to keep on calling this logout function. And then I also, I'm not sure why I set loading to true. It needs to be false, so I need to set it false right here. I set it false right here, but I set it to true down here as well, so I'm just going to change that. And now everything should work fine. All right, so automatically it redirected me to my profile page, and now I'm going to log out, and it takes me to my login page. All right, so that's it, you guys. If you guys like this video, please consider giving me a thumbs up, comment, subscribe. This is my first video, so any interaction would be greatly appreciated. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.